Imagine standing on the sun-scorched docks of Buenos Aires in the early 1900s, watching great ships sail in from across the Atlantic. Throngs of immigrants spill onto the piers, their eyes sparkling with hope. They carry suitcases packed with little more than dreams, certain that this country at the end of the world is about to become the next global superpower. The city itself looks like a painting come to life. Grand boulevards lined with ornate European-style buildings, glittering cafes overflowing with chatter, and theaters so majestic they rival the best in Paris. Believe it or not, around this time, people in Europe would say, as wealthy as an Argentine, when they witnessed lavish lifestyles. Argentina was, undeniably, one of the richest nations on Earth. Yet fast forward 100 years, and the scene is unrecognizable. The bustling glamour of Buenos Aires has been overshadowed by a series of financial crises so severe that many citizens have seen their life savings evaporate more than once. Hyperinflation, where prices climb daily or even hourly, became an all-too-familiar reality. Today, nearly half the population lives below the poverty line, and the Argentine peso's value is a fraction of what it once was. The question that lingers like a ghostly whisper through the streets of Argentina's grand boulevards is, how did this happen? How did a nation that started the 20th century as one of the world's wealthiest end up in a constant struggle to keep its economy afloat? Let's step back in time and unravel the story, piece by piece. Picture a glittering age, horse-drawn carriages clattering along cobblestone streets, their passengers adorned in fine clothes, sipping on mate or enjoying a rich café con leche. At the turn of the 20th century, Argentina was the land of boundless promise. Foreign investment was flowing in at an unprecedented rate. Steakhouses bustled with well-heeled patrons, and opera houses featured world-class performers. Buenos Aires earned the moniker Paris of South America, and not just for its architecture. It was a genuine contender on the global cultural stage. But if you pause and look closer, you'll see the cracks forming under the polished surface. For a brief moment in history, Argentina defied gravity, until it didn't. It fell, recovered slightly, stumbled, and then collapsed again in a pattern that spanned more than a century. How could a nation so favored by geography and international acclaim plunge into endless cycles of economic and political turmoil? And perhaps the most pressing question of all, can Argentina ever claw its way back? In the late 1800s, Argentina was riding a wave of prosperity that seemed unstoppable. Ships from Europe docked daily, bringing immigrants from Italy, Spain, Germany, and beyond. Many arrived with barely any possessions, but an unwavering belief that they were forging better futures. The energy of Buenos Aires was electric. Newly arrived workers found jobs in everything from meatpacking plants to railway construction, and those who ventured beyond the city discovered the Pampas, a vast, fertile plain that stretched to the horizon like a green ocean. Here, on these legendary plains, lay Argentina's economic engine. Blessed with some of the most arable land on the planet, Argentina rapidly became one of the world's top exporters of wheat and beef. This surge in agricultural exports was paired with significant foreign capital, especially from Britain, which financed the construction of railways and ports. The logic was simple: invest in infrastructure, and you'll ship agricultural goods out faster, turning hefty profits in the process. By 1913, Argentina was ranked among the 10 wealthiest nations, boasting a GDP per capita that outstripped several European powers, including Germany and Italy, and even rivaled that of the United States. Yet beneath this economic miracle lay a precarious foundation. A huge part of Argentina's wealth depended on a single economic artery: exporting agricultural goods. If global demand for these products were to drop, or if foreign investors pulled out, the entire system would wobble, if not collapse outright. In other words, Argentina had placed too many eggs in one basket. In 1914, the First World War erupted in Europe like a thunderclap. Global trade was violently disrupted. Nations that once welcomed Argentine exports were too preoccupied with the war effort to import luxuries like beef or wheat in previous quantities. Though this slowed Argentina's economy, it did not destroy it. The real blow came in 1929 with the Great Depression. Global demand for commodities plummeted. Argentine exports dropped by nearly 50%, and the country's once booming prosperity shrank like a balloon losing air. However, the shockwaves were not just economic, they were political. In 1930, the Argentine military staged a coup d'etat, unseating a government that had, by and large, been democratically elected. For a nation that had proudly touted its democratic institutions for nearly 70 years, this was an earthquake of societal proportions. It was as though the bedrock of Argentine stability cracked overnight, setting a precedent that would reverberate for decades. Whenever the government struggled or the economy sank, a coup could be lurking just around the corner. From that point on, Argentina never settled into a long stretch of political calm. Leaders, whether military or civilian, rotated through the presidency in rapid succession, each leaving behind a deeper sense of uncertainty. And as history has repeatedly shown, where political chaos reigns, economic instability is seldom far behind. By the 1940s, Argentina was desperate for someone, anyone, who could restore a sense of direction. Juan Domingo Perón, a former army officer, emerged as that figure. Perón was a spellbinding orator, a man whose speeches seemed to tap directly into the hopes of the working class. He promised higher wages, strong labor protections, and a renaissance for Argentina's economy. When he took office in 1946, buoyed by immense popular support, many believed he might be the man to rebuild the nation's broken foundations. In the beginning, Perón's approach delivered results. He nationalized key industries, from railways to utilities, and channeled significant funds into social welfare programs. His wife, Evita Perón, added star power. She championed the poor, supported women's suffrage, and solidified the regime's working-class support. Images of the glamorous Evita handing out welfare to the needy became iconic, and her untimely death in 1952 only further canonized her in the eyes of millions. However, the seemingly bright policies had a dark side. To fund massive social spending and maintain industrial growth, Perón printed money aggressively, a move that stoked the fires of inflation. As prices rose, manufacturers started feeling the pinch, and foreign investors became increasingly wary of the Argentine market. Meanwhile, Perón's government grew more authoritarian. By 1955, the military had seen enough. Another coup swept him out of power, forcing him into exile. Yet, Perón left behind more than memories. His legacy, heavy state intervention, ambitious social programs, and a readiness to print money, became a template for successive governments. Political leaders would toggle various switches of Peronist economics, often hoping for quick fixes to deep-rooted problems. But as the decades would reveal, these tactics would trap Argentina in an endless dance with economic collapse. What followed Perón's exile was an era that can only be described as tumultuous. Governments rose and fell like waves in a storm. In the 1960s and 1970s, one administration after another tinkered with currency controls, tariffs, and public spending. Yet, the cost of living continued to climb, steadily at first, then at a runaway pace. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, inflation in Argentina started to escalate into dangerous territory. Printing money had become a default tactic. Whenever public coffers ran dry, the government simply fired up the presses. At first, this kept the lights on, but it also devalued the currency. The more money that flooded the system, the less it was worth. Soon enough, an unstoppable feedback loop formed. Currency devaluation led to more desperation, which led to more printing. Real wages dropped, and the price of basic goods began to skyrocket. Then came hyperinflation. Between 1988 and 1989, Argentina's annual inflation rate reached an astounding 5,000%. Imagine going to a bakery to buy bread and discovering that by the next week, the price might have doubled or tripled. People rushed to supermarkets the moment they got paid, racing against the ticking clock of currency devaluation. Shop owners sometimes updated prices multiple times a day, each new sticker reflecting the peso's eroding value. The middle class saw its savings evaporate. For many, the dream of a secure life turned into a daily battle to survive. Yet somehow, Argentina hadn't reached its final breaking point. In the early 1990s, Argentina introduced one of the most audacious economic experiments in its history, pegging the Argentine peso to the US dollar on a one-to-one basis. This policy, known as the convertibility plan, was spearheaded by Economy Minister Domingo Cavallo. On paper, the idea seemed brilliant. Tying the peso to the dollar was supposed to eliminate inflation by preventing the government from printing money at will. And at first, it worked. Inflation plunged, and foreign investors began returning to Argentina, lured by the newfound monetary stability. But cracks began to form almost immediately. With the peso effectively as strong as the dollar, Argentina's exports became too expensive on the global market, eroding a key source of national income. Domestic industries struggled to compete with cheaper imports. Meanwhile, the government continued spending, often more than it earned in taxes, and borrowed heavily to cover the gaps. The longer the peg remained, the more foreign debt piled up. By late 2001, the situation was untenable. Argentina couldn't meet its debt obligations, and doubts about the currency peg triggered a frantic run on the banks. In December of that year, the government froze bank accounts, an infamous move known as the corralito. Ordinary Argentines couldn't access their own savings. Protests erupted nationwide. People banged pots and pans from apartment windows or in the streets, an outcry known as the cacerolazo. Riots spilled over into violence, and in a matter of days, President Fernando de la Rúa fled the presidential palace by helicopter. Argentina defaulted on over $100 billion in sovereign debt, the largest default the world had ever seen at that time. When the dust settled, the peso's value plummeted, and economic activity contracted sharply. Unemployment soared. Middle-class families that had carefully saved in peso-denominated accounts found their life's work shredded to pieces. In some neighborhoods, people resorted to barter clubs just to get basic groceries. It was, by most measures, the darkest hour in modern Argentine economic history. In the years following the 2001 collapse, Argentina tried a series of measures to get back on its feet. After the peso's devaluation, exports surged. This, coupled with high global commodity prices, provided a temporary bounce. In the mid-2000s, under the presidency of Nestor Kirchner, the economy seemed to revive, helped by debt restructuring deals that partially resolved the default. For a while, annual growth looked promising. Stores reopened, construction boomed, and consumption climbed. But the ghosts of the past never completely disappeared. Government spending, once again, grew more robust than tax revenues. Price controls on basic goods tried to keep inflation in check, but behind the scenes, money supply expanded. Official inflation figures often clashed with those calculated by independent analysts, leading to widespread skepticism of government data. By the time Cristina Fernández de Kirchner took office in 2007, Argentina was visibly struggling to curb rising inflation and maintain investor confidence. Over the next decade, the country would lurch from one set of economic policies to another, sometimes flirting with austerity, other times resorting to capital controls and more currency printing. In 2015, Mauricio Macri attempted a market-friendly approach, lifting certain currency controls and wooing foreign investors with promises of stability and growth. But even under Macri, Argentina's old problems, high inflation, unpayable debt obligations, and political discord, proved stubborn. By 2018, the government once again turned to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, for the largest bailout in IMF history, roughly $57 billion. Still, inflation remained high, and the national debt ballooned. Today, under President Alberto Fernández, Argentina finds itself battling inflation rates surpassing 100% per year. Millions of Argentines rely on precarious, short-term strategies to survive, moving their pesos into more stable assets like US dollars whenever possible, or buying goods in bulk before prices rise again. Poverty levels hover above 40%, meaning almost half the population struggles to secure basic necessities. For a nation that was once the envy of Europe, this reality is both tragic and perplexing. So, will Argentina ever escape this seemingly endless loop of crisis? Many economists argue it can, but it will require a radical transformation of political and economic culture. First, the government would need to address structural deficits, meaning it should not consistently spend more than it collects in revenue. Second, the country must reduce its reliance on short-term fixes, like printing money to cover deficits. Third, Argentina needs to rebuild trust with both domestic and international investors through long-term stability, transparent data reporting, and judicial assurances that contracts will be honored. Yet all of these solutions hinge on a vital ingredient: political consensus. Without stable leadership and a collective commitment to adopt fiscally responsible policies, even when they're unpopular, reforms have a habit of being reversed the moment they cause short-term pain or face resistance. Argentina has all the ingredients to thrive: natural resources, a well-educated populace, and a rich cultural heritage. But historically, these strengths have been undermined by political infighting, corruption, and short-sighted governance. Some observers hold on to hope, pointing to the country's resilience and its capacity to reinvent itself. After all, Argentina survived hyperinflation, military dictatorships, and massive debt defaults, each time managing to stay afloat. Even if battered and bruised, others remain skeptical, convinced that without a genuine systemic overhaul, Argentina's destiny is to repeat the mistakes of the past. Every new government arrives promising to break the cycle. Some try austere measures to tame inflation. Others expand welfare programs to soften the social impact of crises. But time and again, the result has been yet another economic shock. The question that lingers is whether Argentina can finally write a different ending to this turbulent story. Which path do you think Argentina will choose? Is it doomed to forever replay the same script? Or is there a turning point looming just around the corner? Your perspective matters, especially in a world where economic fortunes can shift as quickly as the tango dancers in a Buenos Aires nightclub. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this deep dive into Argentina's economic journey riveting, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore stories that go beyond the headlines, revealing the human drama behind the statistics.